All right, we are here on USFL News Hub channel with the main man, Mike Mitchell. Mike, thanks so much for joining us. We are wrapping up the USFL season, so give us your thoughts on the championship game.
Thanks for having me on, Mark. It was a fun season. Predictable ending. It's like watching a sequel that has the same ending to the first movie. You got to be impressed with the Birmingham Stallions. Skip Holtz did a tremendous job. I think Zachary Potter, the GM, doesn't get enough credit. Like the Stallions lost a lot of key players from their championship team a year ago. Their best receiver, Marlon Williams, Bo Scarborough, running back, he got hurt early in the season. Everybody knows about Jamar Smith getting hurt. And so Zach Potter did a very good job, the GM of the Stallions, bringing in players like, Person Jr. and players like that throughout the season. And I think the big thing is with Alex Magoo, how much he evolved as a player
Yeah.
this season, his relationship with Skip Holtz. The Stallions were the inevitable champions. It felt like they were going to be champions, from season point on. They kind of had a little bit of a hiccup early on, and they put things together. The Maulers were game, good defense, but you're not going to win a championship kicking only field goals. And the Stallions were just too much for them. You had one division where two teams made the playoffs at 4-6, and then you had Superior South division with the Stallions who are head and shoulders above everybody there. And so, it was an interesting game, and an interesting USFL season. It was cool. The aspect of the second year, which we haven't really had in this space, it was cool to follow these teams, how they operated. Some of the teams that rested on their laurels from a year ago and had poor off seasons, like the New Jersey Generals, that they didn't have a good year two in the league. Mike Riley had a bad year, winning only 3 games. They struggled. And some of the teams were able to maintain their quality. We saw the Stars fail to live up to expectations. They, for a stretch there, looked like maybe they would be a contender for the championship game, but then fell apart at the end of the season. So there were interesting elements to follow with all 8 of the USFL teams. We saw the revamped Maulers. They were, even though they only won 4 games, they were more respectable. It's hard not to be more respectable than they were the year before, but it was cool to see them make a run. And so, we had some improved aspects of the USFL, and some areas that still need improvement. So, but we're on to year 3, which is the most important thing, and it's great that we're in a space right now where there are 2 prominent alternative non-NFL pro leagues in the states that are actually moving on to other seasons. We'll see. Fingers crossed. Hopefully, this lasts as long as possible.
Yeah. So speaking of some of the players, one of the things I tweeted during the championship game was like, hey, put Kyle Sloter on the Pittsburgh Maulers and maybe you have a different thing. So what about guys like Kyle Sloter? We got Ryan Willis was kind of a guy that people were excited about. Do you see like any of, some of these guys moving around different parts of the different teams?
I think the thing that we saw in the USFL this season is the benefit of a player being on the same team second year. So like maybe like a EJ Perry, if he returns to the league and he's with Michigan next year, he'll be even better than he was because he showed a lot at the end of the season there, even having a big game against the Maulers defense. So we saw with Magoo in Birmingham how being in the same system for a second year was a benefit to him.
Now, I
And
feel
he
like
became a
Magoo wasn't
superstar.
that good in the first year.
He wasn't. He
Yeah,
he
and then
had,
all of a
he
sudden
had
I was like,
3.
what happened to this guy?
But that's the benefit of like having they talked about this during the broadcast, and Joel Klatt, who does a tremendous job, talked about how Alex Magoo changed his diet in the offseason, his training regimen, his practice regimen. So you can tell he looks like a different athlete out there. He was already a mobile quarterback to begin with. He changed his practice habits. It just goes to show you like the benefit of these leagues that you got a young quarterback like Magoo who was drafted into the NFL, spent time with the Seahawks, Texans, etc. And he's getting an opportunity to be in the same system for the second year, and he evolved as a player. Now that can happen for some of the other quarterbacks around the league. We saw with Cole Kelly, he's a fascinating guy with Memphis, big, tall drink of water, 6'7", 6'8", however you want to list him.
Yeah.
That was essentially his rookie season in the pros. So working with Todd Haley, I know Todd Haley has his fair amount of critics, but there's no question about his experience as an offensive coordinator on the pro level in the NFL, etc. So that's a benefit to somebody like Kelly. And so I think Kelly has upside. I think EJ Perry has upside. And that second year aspect is helpful. Now, you mentioned guys like Kyle Sloter and others. I don't know if they're going to find like Troy Williams for the Maulers. He was efficient all season long. They didn't ask him to do very much, didn't have a lot of experience. Um, I think he did okay, all things considered. But the Maulers had, at the end of the day, they had, the least effective offense in the league, and they were heavily aided by a dominant defense and an excellent special teams that gave them terrific field position all season.
Yeah.
Isaiah Henney, Sim, very good kick returners, right? Hopefully they get NFL opportunities, those guys. I'm a big fan of Henny's. So, there are quarterbacks like that. Who's to say that Troy Williams doesn't get better? But I think some of these guys, the Kyle Sloters and the Ryan Willis you mentioned, it's all about opportunity. They didn't really, Sloter didn't get a chance to play because obviously Magoo was great, and they didn't really dress him very much. A lot of USFL teams kind of played musical chairs with who was from week to week, like Philadelphia would do this, the Stars.
Uh-huh.
They would play Thompson one week so he can get an active paycheck, and then play Vadley the alternate week so he can get an active paycheck, and they would rotate who was behind Cookus with the Stars. So, I mean, it is what it is with that situation because you don't have any win bonuses. I believe the practice squad guy gets 1,500. So Kyle Sloter had weeks where he wasn't even dressed. They would dress Morton and what have you. Willis, same thing. But I think they need to continuously look towards younger quarterbacks with upside. And, it's part of the system. I think it's very important the system you're in, the coaching you're in. I think Magoo showed a lot to me. He evolved immensely.
Yeah.
That's what happens when quarterbacks get more playing time, when they're able to be in a system. That's a credit to Skip Holtz and that staff. But that shows you how, with the existence of this pro league of the USFL, made Alex Magoo a better quarterback.
Yeah. So speaking of the existence of the USFL, guys talking about Reuben Foster as a guy potentially getting Brandon Aubrey. Is there other names out there that we haven't seen officially really guys get signed with teams, but do you think they're going to hit that mark the same way they did last year, or you hearing any names that might be signed? I mean, the problem is there's another league that already kind of filled some of that spots. And
Sure.
so what are your thoughts
I
on
think,
that?
as always the case with these leagues, people can check this out at xflnewshub.com. XFL 2020 had a lot of players that got opportunities in the NFL that year. I don't want to say it's numbering 70. I think I did a recently article about that. The USFL got 60 players who got an opportunity at some point during the 2022 season to sign on with an NFL team. There was only one player, two technically, that made the 53 at the beginning of the 2022 NFL season, Micah Abernathy, and of course, league MVP Cavante Turpin.
Yeah.
19 players ended up on NFL practice squads, 19 former USFL players. And then some of them got opportunities. A good number of them got opportunities to be elevated to the 53 or the active game day roster and what have you. So I do think the numbers game is important. You make a good point about the XFL being out there. I believe the number with the XFL right now is at 30. If I'm not mistaken, 30 XFL players have signed on with NFL teams, are currently on NFL offseason rosters after playing in the league. And I believe it's 108 or 110 XFL 2023 players have gotten workouts or tryouts. So it's hard to find your way in, but there's definitely a lot of talent in the USFL that deserve opportunities. We talked about, Reuben Foster and all that, Mark Thompson. I mentioned Isaiah Henney a little while ago. Alex Magoo, I think, is someone, if you look at it, who can definitely be a number 2 quarterback in the NFL, as far as I'm concerned. I think you need to pick the right spot. We've seen the situation with PJ Walker and Taylor Heineke. They picked the right situations for themselves, and they had connections there. And now they're going on to their 4th season in straight in the NFL after being part of the XFL in 2020. So when you look at it at that, somebody like an Alex Magoo or any player that's played in the USFL in 2023, it's all about where you end up. And I think when a quarterback, you need to see a path. We're seeing this with Nathan Rourke, who's a superstar in the CFLs with the Jacksonville Jaguars. You need to go to a team where you have a connection with the offensive staff, and
That's
where
who
you
you
think,
know.
and who you know, and you have an opportunity to potentially, maybe Magoo could be on someone like the Ravens or the Giants or somewhere where there's an opening to maybe be the number 2 quarterback there. There are other teams as well, but I think he's definitely proven it. Thompson is an interesting running back for the Gamblers. He's had off the field issues. He had issues in college. We saw how dominant he was in the
Mhm.
USFL this past season. Tremendous player, whatever, 14 rushing touchdowns, whatever absurd number it was. So he's always had elite tools. He deserves an opportunity. Brandon Aubrey, you mentioned. There's a lot of really good kickers in the USFL this season.
Yeah.
A lot of guys who really had big time years. Luis Aguilar obviously was tied the record for most field goals in a pro football game. He had 8. Derek Dillon is a player I've always been a big fan of. LSU 4.2 speedster. He's been on NFL teams before. I think he's going to get another shot. I think a lot of times these guys who have special teams ability have a chance to stick. That's the thing with like a lot of like players in the XFL and USFL. If you're a starter at receiver and you star in the XFL or USFL, that's a good thing. But if you have a special teams background, you actually have an opportunity to last, because it's very difficult to make an NFL team as starting lineup, top 3 receivers, that kind of thing. If you don't cover kicks, if you don't return kicks, punts, etc.
Yeah.
So I think that's a way to get in. So Derek Dillon's a guy I really like from Memphis, formerly of the Bandits, right? Formerly of
Mhm.
LSU. So there are a lot of good players in the USFL. I think a good number of them will get opportunities. NFL training camps are getting started at the end of the month. It's kind of tricky right now because a lot of NFL teams are already at their 90-player roster limit. So that there needs to be openings that are created for players to come on board, right? So you saw the Carolina Panthers sign, I believe it's 4 XFL players. They had to cut good players to get to there, right?
Yeah.
You see, like somebody who's interesting to me to Spring Pro Football League, like a Jacob Eason gets cut to make room for XFL guys coming in, right? So I think you'll see the same thing in the NFL. There are some standout players that definitely deserve a shot. I think the number doesn't surprise me. I saw this with the AAF too. You'll see 40, 50, 60 or more guys who throughout the NFL season they get opportunities to latch on to an NFL practice roster or make an NFL 53. The big thing though is how many of these guys actually make active rosters and how many people last. Like I don't have the number in front of me. I can look it up,
Uh-huh.
but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there are still 19 XFL 2020 players still in the NFL. And that's the PJ Walkers, the Taylor Heinekes, the Donald Parham Juniors, the Elijah Campbells, the Michael Dunns. List goes on and on. Scott Daly, Christian Kuntz. There's a bunch of them,
Yeah.
right? That are still in 4 years later. They're going into their 4th NFL season. So, can the players that make the NFL last? Can they stick? Right? Because a lot of guys get camp opportunities. A lot of guys get a cup of coffee on the practice squad. Can they actually
Yeah.
stick? Can they stay there? So there are definitely players in the USFL that are worthy of being on NFL teams. A lot of guys on the Maulers defense deserve shots. So we'll see how it goes. But and I'm not surprised when these leagues have very good talent because less than 2% of all college football players make the National Football League. So
Yeah.
that means over 98% of college football players don't play in the NFL. So there's a lot of quality football players, and the existence of the XFL and the USFL, is great. It's great for the players. They have an opportunity to either continue their pro careers like a Reuben Foster or start their pro careers. So it's
Yeah.
really cool.
Over under 30. What do you think? You think it's gonna be over 30 players that sign, or you think it's gonna be
Definitely,
under?
definitely, it should be over based on watching USFL teams this year.
Mhm.
I'll say under for the moment, just because the opportunities need to come up. I
Yeah.
definitely think that opening. There are a few teams in the NFL that are 88. I study this like a maniac. There are a few teams that are at 88 players on their roster.
Uh-huh.
But a lot of them are at 90. So, like I said, in order for that openings to be created, and you'll create openings. If you like a Derek Dillon, if you like a Thompson, if you like a Magoo, unfortunately, you'll get rid of somebody.
Yeah.
And there'll be injuries. Training camps start at the end of the month. There are a couple of teams like the Jets are starting, I believe, 21st, 22nd.
Of
Some teams are
July.
starting, yeah, some teams are starting on the 25th. So, and then you'll see injuries happens all the time. Like you see guys tearing their ACLs and OTAs. I think
Yeah.
the Jets had a very good player in Clark, Chuck Clark, who got injured. A player they acquired from the Ravens.
Yeah.
So, that's the kind of thing that happened. Unfortunate. That's part of the game, right? It's a numbers game. It's difficult, and sometimes you need a player to get hurt or cut just for you to get an opportunity. And the ironic thing is, when I see the players who are cut, I think to myself, hey, that player would be pretty good in the USFL or the XFL. I see a Jacob Eason or somebody cut to make room for an XFL player, and I'm like, hey, this guy would be interesting in the XFL. So
Yeah.
it's fascinating how that works.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see an XFL guy get cut and then for a USFL guy to get picked up in his place. I'll let the fanboys go crazy on that one. All right, so we're gonna do the little.
Or we could have XFL and USFL players play together. What if Alex Magoo's throwing passes to, I don't know, just throw out a name like a Hakeem Butler or Darius Shepard or
Yeah,
whatever? They could
be
be
kind of
shiny.
cool.
I remember it was funny watching it, like in the offseason. The Ben DiNucci had a very good preseason for the Cowboys, and obviously ended up with the Dragons and all that. But it was
Yeah,
fun. He was connecting with players like Brandon Smith, who made the Defenders and just recently signed with the Cardinals. So it's like we could see a little bit of that. We could see some. So meeting of both worlds where XFL and USFL players play together, become teammates.
yeah,
Because there's situations now with the Steelers where there's players from XFL 2020 on the Steelers, like Kenny Robinson, who was drafted into the NFL.
uh,
He's in practice covering Hakeem Butler, who played in XFL 2023.
yeah,
They're both former Battlehawks. So
yeah,
it's the 2020 Battlehawk and the 2023 Battlehawk competing against each other in camp and maybe competing for a roster spot.
yeah,
All is said and done. So that's kind of unique. So we might get some of that stuff going on. That makes the preseason. I'm a maniac who watches preseason games to
yeah.
begin with.
Me too.
That makes them even more fun because not only are we going to see future XFL and USFL players during the preseason games, we saw like John Trey Kirkland, hopefully he gets healthy, was a
Mhm.
superstar in the preseason last year, and then ended up being on the Arizona Cardinals practice squad and doing great for Houston before he unfortunately had a season-ending injury. You see a lot of those superstars in the preseason end up in the XFL and USFL. And it's going to be interesting watching the XFL and USFL's best in preseason games playing together with each other on other teams, trying to make a Brandon Aubrey, trying to make a team, that kind of
Yeah,
thing. John Parker Romo trying to make a team for the Lions. So it makes the preseason games that more interesting if you follow these leagues.
yeah. It's definitely if you're a nerd like us, the preseason's a lot of fun, and even going to the games. That's why I like to go to a Ravens preseason game just because I want to see former players in the USFL and also guys that I'm like, hey, I like that guy. He could be a good fit in one of these leagues. All right, so let's get to the compliment sandwich. So we've been talking about good stuff. I want you to give me, we're going to do 3 negative things you like about the US or about the USFL that you don't like about the USFL. And then we'll
Okay.
finish with 3 positives from the USFL season. So I've got a couple of mine, and then so we're going to start. This is the compliment sandwich. If you've never heard of it, Google it. So give us 3 negative things about the USFL season this year.
Okay. So the obvious, I hate to beat a dead horse. I wrote about this at USFLnewshub.com. I did an analysis on the championship game ratings. The lack of a crowd atmosphere at their games still is an ongoing problem for the
Mhm.
USFL. It hurts their perception. It hurts in terms of the atmosphere. It hurts the TV product. It hurts in terms of finances because they're not making money selling tickets.
Well, they don't even really make any money selling tickets to begin with. I mean,
It
it's
hurts.
really
It hurt their.
affordable.
It's hurt their ratings. It's a hard enough time as it is. We saw the championship game did a 1.157 million viewers, 1.2 million if you add streaming. Those are numbers from NBC that were relayed
Yeah.
to me directly from NBC. So that's down from last year's 1.5 million viewers, 1.52, I guess, if you round it out. But I think that's a big thing with it right now is the two things off the bat, I would say is attendance. It's not through effort. The USFL tries. They have fan-friendly ticket prices. Fans can get in for free. Kids can get in for free. They have very affordable pricing for families. They really try to put people in the stands. They try. They promote it. They try heavily, but it hasn't worked out. And a big reason it doesn't work out, it ties into the TV product suffering because of it. The atmosphere is that these teams are not in their markets, right? So people hate it. The USFL loyalists hate when you bring it up, right? When you knock the hub concept, because the reason why the league is able to go to a year 3, the ironic thing is because of the fact that they have a financially smart model to avoid going overboard with expenses, and
And
that's why
losing
they're
$60 million the first
yeah,
year.
well, they could lose. See, that's the thing. We saw Edward Hartman, who worked for the USFL as a top executive there. He commented on that. He thought the number that the XFL lost was surprising.
Surprising that that's a lot.
Surprising and not in 60 million is not a huge loss.
That's what
60,
his reaction was.
60 million is peanuts. He said, because honestly, because it takes hundreds of millions of dollars to fund these leagues. It's tens of millions of dollars just to get insurance alone. So that just before you even step on the field, before you even sell a ticket. So he thought, and if you go back and people check out his tweet, I retweeted it. I know it's been a few weeks now. He thought that number would be in hundreds of millions, not only 60 million. Anybody who's tracked these, because anybody who's tracked these pro football leagues knows how expensive they are to run. If you sit down and do the numbers, it's ridiculous. If you just do player payroll, if you got 800 employees, you're running a startup company, right? Yeah. I know they cut down on travel expenses. I know they curtail. Now, there was a time where the XFL was going to have only a hub in Arlington with all 8 teams, which I contend. Thank God they shifted from that. I understand they would have saved more money, but that would have been a disaster if the Defenders played in Arlington. If St. Louis the Battlehawks didn't come back to St. Louis, it would have been a disaster.
Yeah.
And so that would have been awful. It would have made I was about to use a curse word, but it would have made it would have made the XFL 2023 season even worse.
Yeah.
Taken away all the luster. If you think about what are the most positive things about the XFL 2023 season? St. Louis, DC, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. So imagine if those teams didn't play there. You think St. Louis would have cared? But anyway, so that's the problem. Therein lies the problem for the USFL. So they have a financial model which is cost cutting, and it's getting them to a year 3. But by the same token, it's what's limiting their potential to attract a better audience. I've spoken with people inside NBC, inside the USFL, inside Fox. I was surprised that Moose admitted it last week that they were disappointed with their ratings. They expected to do a whole lot better this year. Their ratings are down from a year ago. They thought because they planted the seeds and established themselves in season 1, that they would get more viewership, because people are always skeptical about these new leagues. They won't give them any respect. So if you prove that you can survive and you're here to stay, so to speak, that you'll have more people that are interested in your league. Then what they did was they streamlined their schedule, so their schedule wasn't all over the place.
Which was great.
Which was smart. They streamlined it. Then what they also did is they increased the number of over-the-air network games. The XFL had whatever it was, 8 ABC games. The USFL had 26. So they figured that the ratings would be much higher. So I think the biggest disappointment, the USFL, is their attendance, and their ratings are a disappointment. That's something I've heard from them, but also you really just look at it. Their ratings were down. The ratings were down all across the board. They only had 2 games all season that averaged over 1 million viewers: the championship game and the Derby lead-in game on NBC in week 4. Those are the only 2. The XFL, I believe, had 5 or 6. 5 of them. They had a 6 game on cable, which did over 1 million viewers. So their ratings, and there's a problem because of the lack of attendance, the lack of an in-stadium atmosphere. It's a hollow feeling, the piped-in crowd noise. With I've gotten, unfortunately, and I don't go public with this stuff, I've gotten attendance figures for some of these games. The Stars game in particular, I think it was 163 paid. We had actually some people at that game who were from Canada that came down to watch. I believe it was McLeod Bethel Thompson.
Oh, really?
Came in for the whole thing there. So, it's just the attendance, the lack of a in-stadium atmosphere, the attendance and the ratings are both disappointing elements for the USFL. As for the negatives,
we got one more.
Yeah, one more. That's tough because there's not a lot about the USFL on-field product that I don't like. Not a big fan of Mike Pereira. That's like a little thing of mine. I think he's very inconsistent. I think anytime you're in that chair and you're an ultimate ruler and have authority over,
they did blow a call in the championship game that a lot of people were pissed off about.
I'm not a big fan of that of his work. Maybe Dean Blandino, who made his, as far as I'm concerned, had a few moments that were questionable as well. Maybe Dean's a little bit more likable. I don't know. But Mike Pereira, I wasn't a big fan of some of the stuff that went on there. I still think the USFL roster sizes are small. I understand that's a budgetary thing too. They only
Yeah.
have 40 active players. They have 10 players on the practice squad. I still don't like that. I think more players need to get active pay. I think the coaching staffs need more players on their active roster on game day. I think I mentioned earlier there's like a musical chairs thing they do sometimes with the backup quarterback, just so guys, which is cool, just so guys can get active pay. The Generals did that with Dakota Prukop and back and forth with Kyle Laletta and all that as a backup quarterback, trying to get these guys, pay extra paychecks, active pay money, that kind of thing. I think that's it's much better than it was in USFL 2022 when they started out with, I think it was like 38 players or whatever, and then they expanded that. I think they should have more players active on game days. I think it would help in terms of overall depth and the quality of play, and it would it would help coaches. With it's not a detriment to the overall product, but you should, in this day and age, you should have more than 40 players on the active roster. So if I'm not going Mike Pereira, I would still say I would like them to dress more active players.
Gotcha.
During games. I think that affects games in the fourth quarter, especially during the summertime. You see defenses dying out there. You see players dying out there.
Oh, especially, yeah.
Yeah, you see that because you don't have any depth behind players. So you don't have the depth behind a certain position. So you see guys like that are like dying, and then some teams run out of gas by the end of the season. So
Yeah.
maybe it's just me watching all the North games multiple times, watching Generals games, but I did notice a lot of shaky play late in games, especially up front. And I think I want players to get paid more. So I think they should be more. There should be 45, but at least stretch it. I think they're moving forward. I think they're expanding it a little bit to 42 next season, if I'm not mistaken. I have to double check that. But in a perfect world, you'd have more than 40 players on your active roster.
Yeah. So for the negative part, I mean, I think the time of the year was something that you just brought up. I kind of agree with that because not only is the schedule when it comes to the NFL and players getting on rosters, the temperature, and it's hot out, and that's the part of I don't like about the XFL is that, especially because it's in February, it's the climate, whatever you want to talk about that, but it wasn't that bad this year, but it was still cold and rainy to go to a game. It's going to affect things. Also, if it's super hot out, it's going to affect the play and it'll affect attendance, because if it's like 90 degrees out, I don't know, but people are used to doing that for baseball games, so maybe it doesn't matter. So I think the time of the year, the one thing you talked about was the crowd, and this is kind of like a positive and negative. So the crowd, the difference is the XFL had a team, and they've gotten rid of a lot of the people that were kind of the PR teams. So the USFL has, each hub had its own PR team, and they kind of outsourced that, which I think was a good idea, because you're just saying, hey, you're working on the season, and once the season's over, we don't need you anymore unless we're doing season tickets. So I kind of liked that approach, because you're using local, I mean, you're not hiring local things, but you're using local people. That's a positive. Negatives, I don't live in those markets, so I don't know what they've done, what they actually did to help generate ticket sales. So I'm kind of like a mix when it comes to that. Will say, as a kind of positive when it comes back to the crowds, I did started hearing that places like Michigan and Memphis were starting to get like identity, and the crowds were starting to kind of connect, and like things started to percolate. Canton, there was stuff with Moose Johnston talking about, maybe Canton would have its own team. I mean, Canton's a good spot. I love Canton, Ohio.
Should have had their own team. And I agree with you quickly. Memphis and Michigan, you plant seeds, you're going to have problems. You're going to have issues with attendance. You're going to have a hard time trying to attract, but at least you're in the market.
Yeah.
And it takes time to build that fan base. It takes time to get people to trust that you're going to be around and last. Lord knows Memphis has gone through this in the past with these leagues. So same thing with Birmingham. They have an awesome team right now. So hopefully more fans come out for the Stallions. But
that's the Stallions should be sold out.
Good. Right. That should be sold out. Birmingham should be sold out. And again, credit to him. Moose Johnston, beginning of the year, came out and said he was disappointed with the Stallions' attendance. He thought, we spent a whole year in Birmingham.
Yeah.
We have a championship team.
Yeah.
They're awesome. They have, I love
great players.
I love
their
brand. I love their brand. I love their colors. I think
Yeah.
they're cool as hell. I think Skip Holtz has done a tremendous job. That team should have, if any of the teams, I know it was part of the desire of the USFL's group to sell these teams to owners. If any of the teams should have an owner, the Stallions should. You would figure, but that market, that market should be so much stronger.
Yeah.
And Moose came out and said that as
Yeah.
much. He's disappointed in their attendance because the USFL, if any place should be receptive to the USFL, it's Birmingham.
Yeah.
You can't have only 10,000 fans at a game. That's great for USFL for this iteration of the USFL standards.
Yeah.
If you actually get 10,000 fans, that's paid or otherwise because of some free tickets go out. Doesn't matter. If you actually get 10,000 fans, that's great when there are games where 300, 400, 178, fans in the stands. So I think planting the seeds, you started to see a little bit. It wasn't huge, but
Yeah.
you started to see, by comparison, it looked great. It was nice to see Michigan. They finally won a home game at the end of the year. They made the playoffs, and EJ Perry played well. Off the street, that was a nice pickup. It
Yeah.
was nice, but you're gonna have that because these markets, it takes time. We saw that in the XFL. Like, not all those markets is great,
I mean,
but
yeah.
fans showed up. Fans showed up. You had legit, 7, 8,000, 9,000. I know that doesn't sound great to a lot of people,
Yeah.
but it's not easy when you have a new team in these markets and you have the history of these leagues where you don't know. Why would you? It's hard to actually make that investment leap of faith and go, I'm getting season tickets for these leagues until
Right.
they prove themselves. So it was good. That is a positive. I'm sorry I jumped on all over your stuff,
That's all right.
but that is a
Yeah.
positive that Memphis and Michigan started to show a little bit of fruits from their labor, a little bit.
Yeah. And so another negative for me um, is, and I see this with a lot of inside the bubble talk between Moose and I've heard Mike Pereira kind of talk about, you know, oh the drone and the production and all this other stuff. Guys, no fans care about the stupid production, what kind of graphics you have, all that stuff. Like, no one cares about that stuff. And I hear that on both sides. Both sides do this.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
here's a disclaimer: no one cares. I don't care if you have a drone flying around, which was annoying the first year. It was a little bit tolerable the second year. No one cares if there's a drone or not. Is not going to make them come to the stadium, like you were saying, and watch the game. That's all insider talk. That's because y'all work in the media business and you think that's important, and it's not.
Right.
It is
I
not
think
important.
I think the commentary teams are important, and
Yeah,
it
and they
looks
were good.
sleek. The USFL, there's no doubt when people tune in, the USFL package looks sleek. You're
And
looking at
that's what
Fox
Moose
NBC.
said. He was like, hey, we have a great package. I don't understand. Because you're in the inside of the bubble. And in the outside of the bubble, we don't care about how great
Right.
your
And
package
you also, it's more about I'm not saying there isn't substance to the USFL because I'm not trying to be detrimental to coaches and the players. But once you get past the cute graphics and packages, which are cool, they're nice, Fox's state of the art, NBC, etc. Once you get past that, if the game itself has piped in crowd noise and doesn't feel like an actual contest where people care,
Yeah.
it hurts it when you look at the stands and see nobody there. It hurts it when guys are trying to celebrate interceptions with the crowd and there's nobody in the crowd.
Yeah.
It's like there's their nature to like play up to the home crowd, and then there's nobody there. It hurt. That's what it is. It's hurt the TV product. I understand why they're doing it. We know this. We talked about this. I reported this when they were doing TSL. I reported what their 3-year plan is. So I'm not surprised that they're going to have a third season. This was what the financial model allowed for them. But I do think that, their failure to recognize, they think I'm a huge fan of Joe Klatt. I know some people were upset at him because he's so hard on the coaches. I think he's tremendous. I love Joe Klatt. I think he's a brilliant guy. I watch the games and I do listen to the commentators, and some of the guys, I don't want to be insulting towards any of the other commentators there. There's a couple of guys that are still not that great
Little
on
green.
the USFL side, right? Same thing with the XFL, right? There's a few guys, but guys like a guy like Joe Klatt is as good as it gets. So, like, yes, when you have a commentator like that who knows his football and can break down games and break down coaching decisions, legitimately knows these players from college football, etc.
Yeah,
that's a plus, right? But that's not enough.
Yeah.
When the mainstream in the football crowd checks out the game, oh, nice package. This looks great. This looks pretty. As soon as they start watching the game and nobody cares about the outcome of the games, there's no energy from the crowd. There's no natural sports league feel to it.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel authentic. It's hollow. Yeah, unfortunately, they turn it off. They've seen enough.
Yeah.
So you got the hardcores. You got me. I'll
Yeah.
watch it.
Oh,
I'll
yeah.
watch it if they play in a parking lot.
Yeah.
But to enhance the TV stuff you're bringing up is a good point, because they figured Moose works with Fox. He's a commentator himself. He's worked on
Yeah.
TV
He
himself.
thinks it's important.
And he thinks, and it's
And
part
it
of
helps,
it.
but
It's part of it. Absolutely. You want to have, look, I'm going to get into like 7 different tangents here, but like AEW's out there, and a lot of wrestling promotions that have, tried to come out as an alternative to the WWE, they've had like poor lighting, and they've had a horrible production, and it's made the product look bad.
Yeah.
AEW, I'm sure it has its critics. There's a lot of stuff maybe you don't like about that product, but their production itself is very nice. So
Yeah.
it's like the lighting and the production and how it looks,
Yeah.
very important. That's important part of it. But
Yeah.
once you get past that, what you present product wise, and this is not a knock on the football players, it doesn't feel like a genuine all the time.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like a genuine, fully fledged pro sports league, because they don't have
And I have heard from former USFL players that played in the XFL that one of the big reasons why they didn't go back was the schedule and the lack of fans. So that also hurts you getting football players.
And I know people hate harping on this stuff, but I hope that we get to a point where it's like year 7 of the USFL and they go, remember those first couple of years? That was crazy.
Which is understandable. I think everybody wants it now.
Right.
But yeah.
I hope we get to year 7 and we go, man, that was kind of crazy that none of the teams didn't play in their markets. But thank goodness they survived and made it. And look how awesome the Maulers are accepted in Pittsburgh and what.
And so here's how you have to. Here's my advice to any league when it comes to, and I learned this from covering all these leagues, is really kind of connect with the influencers. Those are the people that go on TikTok and go on Instagram and they're making videos, and then the other people are seeing it. I couldn't tell you, going my experiences with the other league and going to events, and how many influencers were out there, and they're giving you free advertisements and stuff. So please, USFL, one of my critiques is give me some pictures to use. After games and stuff, like I have no pictures to use. I have nothing that I like. Give us the tools. The purpose of the USFL News, all these sites, CFL News Hub, all of them, we are not here to bag on any of these leagues, because that's stupid. And that is really, to me, is an old, I'm going to get on a rant now. That is an old business model. That is old fart television. That is ESPN and your Skip Bayless crap garbage, your Fox News and MSNBC, that business model. That's not what we do. We're here to enhance the league and promote the league, that by giving you content that doesn't exist on Fox Sports, which your own channels don't even talk about, the USFL, which is it's like all these other shows are if you had a show on Fox Sports, I mean, the XFL tried to do something on ESPN, and the guy who was in charge, head of that show, just got canned. And they didn't even promote that. None of these leagues, and I know it costs money and all this other stuff, but if Fox Sports had a weekly show, you've got nothing on there but garbage sports. Both leagues put on a show. It doesn't have to be this high. Put us on it there, and we'll just do it from Zoom. It'd be better than nothing, to kind of get that juice into the sport where people can kind of connect and see what's going on. And I mean, you have the tools at Fox Sports, these shows that go behind the scenes or whatever. The USFL did it, the XFL did it. Nice, cool. But connect with your influencers and create more influencers. The more people out there. I mean, the NFL is in just a massive loop cycle, because all the sports talk shows, all they talk about is football. And you go on Sirius XM fantasy sports. They don't even talk about basketball fantasy or baseball fantasy, hardly. They talk about football. Now they're talking about football. That's because it's kind of in this self-fulfilling loop, And there's so many people that are into it that it's just kind of the snowball just got huge. And now the NFL is the king of all sports in North America. The way you can get that with all of these leagues is focus on the influencers, let them give you the free advertisement to push it to the next level. And and promote you're doing events and get the word out there. Social media is not super important because some people are like, oh, they should tweet more. Twitter is, I mean, in itself is already is. I'm sorry, it is a dying platform as we speak. As Instagram supposedly is and coming out there with their own Twitter killer. We'll see how that goes. But still, people love Instagram. On Facebook, I can't tell you, when I meet fans, a lot of them use Facebook and Instagram more than some of these other things. So it's really, trying to connect with the influencers. They're the ones that are going to draw interest. The reason why people will, to bring back to the XFL, the St. Louis, because all the other markets were disappointment, in my opinion. I mean,
Yeah.
Orlando, San Antonio was disappointing. I mean, Vegas, we won't even talk about that. But St. Louis and DC. Why was DC so popular? It was because of the stupid beer snake. And it was a lot of fun, and the atmosphere was hot, and everybody who went to the game was like, this was a lot of fun. I saw like the Boatmen or something was in Memphis. Like, go all in on Boatmen. Just get a bunch of young college students with boat hats, like the little Captain Stubing hats from whatever, stick them in the end zone and get 30 of them. Just go to a fraternity and give them all tickets, and then let them cultivate that, that thing there. The Michigan Panthers, they could do that as well. Like, Birmingham, get those guys to make their selfies, because that's what brought people to the game. St. Louis, people are in St. Louis because they want to stick it to Stan Kroenke and the NFL. That is a big reason. But other two is that's like a main reason, but also it's the atmosphere, and they're excited about having football. These leagues need to focus. That's how I think you build interest in your local markets.
Yeah,
That's
these
my
leagues.
rant.
Yeah, these leagues have a very difficult time getting any attention on the sports landscape. You'll know when they've made it when radio shows, talk shows. I know radio's going away, but online shows, podcasts, when they actually start talking about the way we talk about the NFL, when they actually start talking about the leagues, their players, their teams, and rather than just the attendance, the ratings, the business
And
aspect
Moose
of it.
said he would focus on the players in the offseason. I 100% agree.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right
And
on.
it's like,
And I think
and
he's a great leader, by the way. I think to have him as the guy, I think is a good. I think they might need some more business guys behind this. I would say Oliver Luck or Jeffrey Pollock. Bring one of those two guys. Jeffrey Pollock in particular. He's a guy that I would snag in a heartbeat to help run that league.
that would be a huge move for the USFL to do something like that. But you have a hard time getting mainstream media attention.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you get outside this bubble, like I write about an NFL team, I've been an NFL fan my whole life. Most NFL fans mock these leagues, don't think they're important, think they're insignificant, and that's the truth. And if you just step out of the bubble, a lot don't even know they exist, right?
Yeah.
It's not on the radar. The USFL, XFL, it's like a blip on the mainstream sports fans' radar. So it's hard. The media treats it the same way. It's hard to get. So if you do have influencers and people, transparency is important. Information is important. If you provide the free information to them, assist these people, the people who are covering your league, and the outlets, and for them to succeed, it has to go beyond the fan dedicated sites, the discords, the reddits, appealing to those little pockets is not going to grow the league.
Yeah.
The fan service stuff, that's good, but you need to appeal to like the influencers, media people. You need to embrace, don't distance. And then you need to work extra hard to get the mainstream to sample your product and give you a chance, because they're not going to grow. They're not going to grow to the point where the ratings went down this year, interest went down in the USFL. So and it's a shame, but it's the truth. They didn't build upon what they had last year. They didn't do horrible. But it was a disappointment. So they did less than they did last year. So I should have done better, and they know it, and they publicly said it. I'm surprised Moose publicly said that, but
Yeah.
I think they need to find a way, because Fox, every now and again, Bayless, no longer Shannon Sharp, they
Yeah.
would talk about the USFL a little bit, show some highlights. They do a little bit of that on FS1, some shows, but it feels forced. It doesn't
It
feel
does feel
natural.
forced.
It feels like an infomercial. It doesn't feel like that
They're
they're
like, oh,
really in.
great.
They're
We wanted
really
to talk
into
about
it.
Aaron Rodgers again for the 50th time.
Yeah,
Why do
exactly.
we have
They're
to
not
talk about
really
the
into it. So
USFL?
you're never gonna. It's gonna take time to get to the point where anybody in the mainstream pays attention to you, and all of a sudden starts breaking down the Maulers' defensive line and Boogie
Yeah.
Roberts, right? But you'll know these leagues have made it when that happens. When people start, they need to get into markets. The USFL needs to get into markets, and then they need to embrace the people who do cover their leagues within those markets. They need to get them information. They need to get them out there. They need to go the extra mile to reach out. They need to appeal to the mainstream media. They need to go the extra mile to pull in, rope in people.
Mm-hmm.
Get a Peter King to come out, a Rich Samini to come out, whoever it is. Get these people to come out and at least sample your game and write about it.
Yeah.
You got to do what you got to do, because otherwise their audience. We saw it this year. The audience is limited for these leagues. They have a cap on their viewership. They haven't been able to.
And having two opposing leagues does not help.
It doesn't help, and there's a cap on it. The XFL did 1.43 million viewers for their championship game on ABC in prime time. The USFL did 1.1 million viewers, 1.157 million viewers on NBC in prime time. The leagues really, there's a cap on their viewership. They're unless you're gonna have to appeal to more than the hardcores.
Yeah.
Hardcores, the Reddits, the Discords, all that stuff is good, but they need to find a way. Both leagues need to find a way to try to rope in the mainstream sports fan, the football fan, because that's what the most disappointing part of the USFL championship game, because you thought, like last year, that you'd get some extra viewers who haven't been paying attention during the season
Mm-hmm.
to watch the game and try it out. And so I know there was a lot of hope with last year. The league ended on such a high note, they had a very good game, Stars
And the
Stallions.
game might have been a reason why the ratings went down too,
Right.
because
And it definitely was. It definitely was. It wasn't a 40-0 type game, but you never got the sense that the Maulers were going to find a way to make that game competitive. They were trying to sneak into the game late, but field goals, they're not going to cut it.
Yeah.
So it's just the way it worked. They ended up losing by 16 and all that. So the game wasn't exciting as last year.
Yeah, that was a great game. First
People
one.
will bring up the markets, but the USFL doesn't do very well in their markets. Nobody in Pittsburgh cares about the Maulers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. Right now I've been denied the market ratings. Last year I was able to post them, but the Philadelphia didn't care about the Stars. New Jersey doesn't care about the Generals. You have decent viewership in the Birmingham market locally. Memphis did okay this year. Michigan did okay, although Michigan has, they didn't draw very well. They got a little bit better towards the end of the season. That market's not completely receptive to the league. Maybe that'll change over time.
Yeah.
I was a huge fan of the Panthers franchise in the 80s. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, there are certain aspects that these leagues just miss on. They miss on the fantasy element, the gambling element.
Gambling is huge.
They don't understand. They really do not. When you're a smaller league, see, the thing is with the NFL, it's a 32-team league. So you have 32 markets and then some that watch. I watch Cardinals games. I watch every team in the NFL. I watch the Ravens. I watch all of them. In a smaller league with only 8 teams, you only get those specific markets that have interest. And if you're not in the markets, those markets don't have interest in your games. So you'll get some fans from a market in Pittsburgh to watch. Not really. So Pittsburgh and New Jersey playing in Canton. If you're going to be in Canton, Ohio, you should have had an Ohio team.
Yeah.
So,
I have a feeling that's going to happen, but
yeah, giving the Maulers, it's a shame. Giving the Maulers a new paint job is not going to lead to ticket sales in Ohio. People from Pittsburgh, I'm not saying it's a civil war between Pittsburgh and Ohio, but Steelers fans hate Browns fans.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. They're not big. They're beautiful places. Nothing wrong. I love Ohio. Always
yeah.
For a pro football team in Ohio, Columbus to be specific, but I love Ohio. Great football place. They always have great ratings, right? But unless their team is actually called Ohio, they're not going to give a shit about, we changed our team to black and gold to appeal to Pittsburgh, but they're playing in Ohio.
Yeah.
The Ohio locally is not going to embrace a Pittsburgh team playing in their market, and Pittsburgh fans are not going to embrace the Pittsburgh team playing in the Ohio market. So that's just, I don't want to say, like if you're gonna have a hub in Ohio, have an Ohio team.
Yeah.
So we'll see what kind of progress they show. Unfortunately, they've been trying to drum up investment money for a long time now, And they've been trying to see if they can sell off these franchises to respective owners, but I don't know if anybody's interested. The first year was kind of an infomercial to accomplish that.
Yeah.
Uh, they've gotten some nice deals with Michigan and Memphis. They need to put these teams in their markets. The league won't see the promised land or have a chance to thrive. The odds are already against these leagues succeeding because you got to convince the general public
Yeah.
to to respect them and give them a chance. That's hard, uphill battle. But they need to eventually go into markets. If you're going to have the Generals, could you imagine if the Generals say people want to talk about the New York Guardians not being a success or what have you, even though they average 15,000 fans per game, 15,000 fans per game, it's like 15 USFL games, right? So that's basically that. But the Guardians had the highest ratings in the XFL. So the highest rated XFL game in 2020, over 3 million viewers, was on a Sunday afternoon. That's the highest rated non-NFL game since the original XFL in
Oh,
2001.
wow.
So that was for the Tampa Bay Vipers and the New York Guardians in Week 1. That was an interesting game there on Fox. So but yeah, if you're gonna have a Generals team, you got to be in the tri-state area to get
Stick them in Rutgers University.
Yeah, like it's going to be hard to convince those snobs too, who are love the Jets and the Giants and all that. But at least if you plant seeds in that market, more people will watch.
Yeah.
The Guardians I was at those games. The Guardians had great crowds. I mean, it was like 20 below zero and snowing, and they said maybe 15,000 doesn't sound great to people, but that would have been like the highest average in the USFL this past season, and it would have been like second or third, maybe third in the XFL this past season if they had 15,000 fans. They didn't have that in Orlando, Vegas games, so or even San Antonio, I guess. So I mean, it is what it is. But I think the football aspect, I guess we'll get to the positives because we're harping on the negative. I like the football. I like the coaching. And then I like that they planted seeds in Memphis and Michigan. If we're going to make that like a Cliff Notes version, I like those aspects. I never have an issue with the football. I think the football was good. I like the talent they got. Some of the teams do a good job in the offseason, like the Generals. Some of these teams need to be more progressive during the offseason and actually add new players, add good players. So I like what Michigan did. They got like Breland Speaks. I like what the Maulers got. Reuben Foster, that improved their team, right?
Yeah.
So they need a lot of these. It's not easy convincing these guys, players that are on the fence to join these leagues, but the teams need to do a better job. The GMs that are in place of USFL teams need to do a better job of replenishing their roster in the offseason. But I do think that the football was good. I like the coaching. I think I mentioned that I like Joe Klatt. I like the seeds that were planted in Memphis and Michigan. I think they can grow over time.
Yeah.
And USFL needs to do that with their other markets. Pick a lane and stay in it. Like you're going to be Ohio, have an Ohio team there. If you have plans for the Generals to be in the tri-state area, make it happen.
Yeah.
Right. Or cut bait. Same thing with the Maulers. Same thing with, the Breakers should be in New Orleans by now. Right. So like figure out a way, get them in Louisiana somewhere. Look, the Cowboys don't play in Dallas. Just anywhere in Louisiana. Just get them in there and call them the New Orleans. At least you're in the general vicinity. So so that's better than playing in Houston or Birmingham or what have you. The Gamblers too, get them in their market, get them a Rice Stadium, whatever. Just get these teams in their markets. They have to figure the USFL. I understand the cost-effective plan to keep the survival going, but at some point they got to start thriving.
I think it's okay for year 3, and I'll get to my 3 positives. I think playing in 4 hubs versus 1 has been a positive. I think they should stick with the 4 because you have to figure out what works. Once those 4 markets are strong, then that's something that you can sell to other areas. So it'd be very difficult. I would still stick with I have a feeling, I think it would be good if they kind of switch, retire a team and stick a team and it could come back, kind of like how they said Tampa Bay Bandits isn't over yet. It's just not here yet. My advice to PR people from all sports, on all of these leagues, is take a tip from the CFL and Armand Doman for the BC Lions. That first game of the season, all those home markets, have a good band play halftime, play in the beginning, so that it gets fans out and gets that kind of party atmosphere. That's kind of how you have to sell it. I mean, the DC Defenders game is all about the beer snake and the chant. And Seattle or St. Louis is all about the tailgate before. I don't know what goes on in those other markets, but that's kind of like where the juice comes from. So start this first season with getting, if you want to get attendance, have some music. That first game, have a named artist. I mean, you're Fox Sports, you know people, and people owe you favors and all this other stuff. Get some good artists there that first game of the season, and also for the local PR teams, bring back former players at events. No one knows, I mean, yes, you could bring Alex Magoo to a Birmingham Stallions event, and that's going to do well. I mean, I don't care if Alex Magoo charges $5 an, so that makes it worth him to go. $5 for an autograph or something like that, or you don't, you pay him. I don't know, whatever your budget stuff is, but that type of, Case Cookus might bring some people, but bring back even NFL guys. Like if you're trying to sell Michigan, and you're in Detroit, you bring back Herman Moore, or you know what I mean, like somebody from the Lions, or if you're, I don't know what you would do about Memphis, but if you're, well, I mean, you're in Canton, Ohio. I mean, you wouldn't want to bring, a Cleveland Brown guy to a, you know what I mean? But like that will get fans, like give us influencers or whatever we are, a hook to bring in other people. I am going to do it's been the only people around me know about any of these leagues is because I talk about them. I'm getting, and now that it's been a full season, I have a lot of people that want to come to a game. I'm not going to tell them to go buy tickets. My plan is to rent a bus, and everybody will pay, that will pick us up and take us all, my friends included and their friends, to the game. We know where we're going to go hang out before. We'll go to the game, then we'll get a bus home, because that's the only way for me that I know that I could get them to go to the game. So that's the way these other local markets, I think, need to play that thing, is to bust people in. See if, for $5, you get a ticket here. Oh, hey, there's going to be a concert. I mean, the CFL had LL Cool J at I don't care who you bring in, to just kind of give people a reason to come back out, because you're dealing with, also, I think the reason why all attendance is down across all these leagues is you're coming back from the post-pandemic world. People are not used to going out. I know a lot of people that are still, hermits in their homes still after all this stuff. Me and my wife are out all the time, and she's a big, let's go outside, go out all the time kind of person. I would be more of an introvert, but now we're out all the time, and there's still people that are doing it. So you're fighting that. So that would be my advice as far as getting fans, real advice, getting fans in the stands. But I think playing in the four hubs, you know, um, getting to a year three, that is a win. There's only one other league that did that, and that was the original USFL. I think that is a positive. I liked the fact that they were kind of making deals. I liked that they were doing some NFT things. They deal with Upper Deck. I bought a couple of like the digital cards and stuff like that. It would be great to have USFL cards that you can buy in the store. I don't know how that all that kind of stuff works, but and the schedule. I thought the schedule and the broadcast partners was by far the best. I mean, we saw traffic on the site spike. If you're on Fox and MS or NBC, went up. When you're on USA, it's down. So I mean, it was definitely drawing interest. But I mean, any of your thoughts on my ramblings there?
No, it's all good stuff, Like anything you can do to appeal locally is good for the teams. They got to be in the market, so that's just like it's just gonna. I understand the plan right now is four hubs. I think they're gonna try. I know they tried um, to find a location for the Stars last and didn't work out in Pennsylvania. Um, so they ended up settling for Canton as like a neutral hub. And then so they got Memphis, they got Michigan, they got Birmingham in their markets. They need to do a better job. You want to see progression. You would
Yeah,
think a lot of this from the traffic we get, right? Um, Anytime you talk about, as silly as it seems to people, but anytime you talk about expansion, You get a lot of traffic. And
Yes.
with these leagues, you have to, what's your hook?
And that's
For
your
the
hook too.
right.
It
So
tells
what's
you
your
what the fans are really interested in. Give me a
right?
reason to be part of your league.
Like
It-
the hook for year two was, hey, now we're playing in more cities, right? We're going
which
to
was
be in
great.
Memphis. We're going to be in Michigan. Year three, they kind of need a hook. And I don't know if you're bringing back the exact same setup that you had in year two. I don't know if that's enough. So my opinion is they need an Ohio team. Who that comes at the expense of, we'll see.
That'd be
Um,
weird for the Maulers to disappear after they played in the championship game.
that's a tough one, and they just rebranded it. They rebranded a black and yellow, black and gold, however you want it, black and yellow, to appeal to Pittsburgh, and they're not even in Pittsburgh. And then to abolish the team, that'd be a little bit strange, right?
Yeah.
So the Ohio Maulers, I suppose, but I think they should be in at least another city. I don't know which. The Stars should at least be in their city, in Pennsylvania. I think they need to show, there has to be beyond. I'm excited. I'm going to watch every game. I'm a maniac. I did an all USFL team. I watched every single game multiple times. So we're talking, there are 43 games this season, at least close to 90 times. The Generals, unfortunately, I had to go back and watch 2 or 3 times.
Uh,
Every preview I did, I watched the games again because I feel like you pick up nuances that you don't pick up the first time you watch it something live, right?
uh.
So anyhow, I think they need to have a hook. I don't see what the hook is
You think
beyond.
Moose said that they're not adding any teams, right?
See, that's the thing too with with any of these leagues. By the time you get to year three and year four, there has to be a hint of. Now there wasn't growth in the ratings. There wasn't real growth in attendance, even though they had. Ohio did not work out. Um, for free spatula day, I got nothing against spatulas, but free spatula day, I think they had with Memphis or what have you. That wasn't really or
Yeah,
Michigan.
that's
One of those.
another thing these local markets can do. That works for minor league baseball.
Right. So you try
Goose
everything.
bobblehead.
So they tried. Like they tried. The tickets are priced a certain way that are extremely affordable. They try very hard to they promote on their social media outlets about tickets and this, that, and the other. It's not like they're not trying. It just hasn't worked out. But I think they don't. My problem with the USFL in year three, not the football. I'm glad they're coming back. I can't wait to the next season. It's gonna be
Yeah.
fun. Right. I'm into all these teams. I'm interested to see what these teams do in the offseason. But I don't see what the hook is for year three. There needs to be a hook to make you want to see part three of this league. And I don't think if they bring it back, just run it back with what they had, man, maybe they'll do a little bit better in Memphis. Depends on the team wins. Maybe they'll do a little bit better in Michigan. Depends on what the team does in the offseason if they win. But if the Generals and Maulers are in the same spot, the Stars are still not at home. It hinders the overall growth and product and the perception of the league. Year three, people go, wow, the Stars are still not playing in Philly. So people feel so. I think that's a detriment to the league that they don't have no choice. They hired investment firms to get investors to invest in the league. They're trying to make deals for the league, but they're being financially responsible.
Uh-huh.
But at some point, I think Fox has got to, you get what you put in. So I think at some point, Fox needs to make some exceptions here if they're okay. And I know they're not okay with the ratings and the attendance.
But you said you talked to some insiders
I've
and
talked to people within the league. And that's why like I said, I'm surprised that Moose came out and said that they were disappointed early in the season, disappointed with their attendance in Birmingham. Not even talking about the hubs in Birmingham, the market
yeah.
where they should do the best. And then when Moose came out to Sports Business Journal, and I know people took it as a dig against the XFL. Quite frankly, I did an article on the site where I felt the USFL would have better ratings than the XFL. Why? It's simple math.
Fox and NBC.
26 over-the-air network games versus whatever it was, 8 for the XFL. So they should have a better ratings average. Games in prime time on network, you should do better. So we see the difference between cable and network every week.
Even ESPN. I'm telling you, it's not a
Even-
home run just because it's on ESPN.
It's not a home run just because it's on ESPN. And they had a couple of games on ESPN one that did over 1 million viewers. They had games that did 900,000 viewers on ESPN. That's awesome. That's a great cable number.
Yeah.
but that's not over-the-air network television, right?
Yeah.
So that's why the XFL had 5 games on ABC, and they only had, I believe it was 1 game in prime time, and that was the championship game.
Yeah.
In terms of on network television on
And a
ABC.
lot of
So
crappy times too, the XFL had
oh
on their
boy,
schedule.
and that was a big problem too. Like early in the season, and they were using it to help build up FX, right? So when I look back on it, I think, oh my God, they had 700,000 viewers, 655,000 viewers on FX. That's honestly, that's really good. If you had 650, because when you look at it, USFL had a game on Fox, the 521,000 viewers, right? So that's on Fox with the Generals. So I mean, TSL had, I believe they averaged 409,000 viewers when they were on Fox the year before USFL re-arrived, if that's even a word. So they had 400. I think their max was 439,000 for one of the games. We did the TSL ratings on the site. I
Yeah.
covered every game in TSL, the jousters and all that.
Yeah.
So with Luis Perez. So anyhow, but but I think if they need a hook for season 3, and it's unfortunate because maybe the financial model doesn't allow for it. So, and they're probably a little upset. And see, I have to ask. I didn't ask this, so I don't know this for sure. So this is just me speculating. But
Uh-huh.
and I know the XFL has said that they plan on a different union potentially representing their players. So we'll
Oh
see what
yeah.
happens. There hasn't been any news of that. But they got to be a little upset that the other league doesn't have a union, and they don't have to do all that. The thing is with the XFL is they already treat their players really well, so they have everything covered already for their players. So the USFL needed a union because they didn't have housing coverage and meal coverage and all that kind of stuff. So the USFL players were more motivated to get a union going. But maybe USFL management's not happy that the XFL doesn't have that. Perhaps the XFL will. But I think Fox needs to really consider moving these teams into their markets or changing the teams, the teams that are floundering in the ratings market-wise, the teams that don't have, at least having a promise of going into a specific market, whether that, they have a bunch of trademarks. So they
Yeah.
got maybe have a team,
Jacksonville.
maybe a team's playing in the hub, but they're called the Oakland Invaders. And
Yeah.
the promise is that they'll be in Oakland in season 4.
Yeah.
Right? So like you need a hook. And it's the same thing with the other league on the side of the fence. Like, it's not necessarily great that Vegas is coming back in year 2. So, and a lot of XFL fans, a lot of people, I hate to say this, there's people who are in Vegas and like the team. But a lot of XFL fans are kind of hoping that Vegas, goes
Moves to
away.
San Diego. Yeah.
Yeah, right. We'll see how that goes. But in terms of the USFL, there's a lot of interesting. It's great that we're having this discussion. My interest is in the league thriving and succeeding and lasting.
Yeah.
Right. And I think
It's
in
good for
these leagues,
business for us.
yeah, it's good for me. This is my lifelong thing. I've been rooting for this to actually work for so long. I fully go into these things knowing that it could be dead at any moment,
Yeah.
and that after a few years it could go away. I think these leagues have a chance to thrive. Like, that's how crazy I am. Like, they not only survive, they could thrive. They just have to make the right moves. Transparency. They got to lean into fantasy and gambling. I think the USFL or the XFL, whoever the hell, somebody's got to figure out how to have fantasy on their site, have season-long fantasy on their site.
Yeah.
So they don't have to outsource this. I played USFL fantasy this year again. Went to the championship game, unfortunately lost, but I won't talk about that. But I think the USFL needs to have fantasy. I think they do a little bit. They dip their toe in the water, but
Yeah.
not enough. And you need to reach out. You need to be transparent in your information. You need to reach out to these outlets. You need to put the work in. Like, you need to check your ego and reach out to media outlets and reach out to people and invite them to come.
Yeah.
Hustle like Stephanie Rudnick hustled,
Yeah.
right? Like, you need somebody in your PR team that's going to do that. Like, have that kind of put in the work like a Jeffrey Pollock did.
Yeah.
You need people who are actually going to make those connections with media members and locally and do all that in order for the product to grow.
Yeah. I would say there's to kind of wrap all this in a nice bow. I think for year 3, the USFL, I think, needs to kind of just sit back. They have the proper business model. I've always said, I feel like their business, like you were saying, their business model is good. It's but it comes with this hindrance, but we could be laughing about this 7 years from now, 10 years
Right.
from now.
We might look back at this and say, God willing, we're all alive, we're all around. We might look back on this in 7 years or 5 years or whatever and go, wow, they had some pretty humble beginnings, the USFL.
Yeah.
But
And that's
look,
the thing. It's not over yet.
they made it. Like, look, and if you look at any league that has ever launched in the history of time, they've had the NFL had humble beginnings. The AFL, which became the AFC and then merged, and you know all that, they was the AFL, then became the AFC after the merger. They had humble beginnings. The NFL in the 90s had rough patches. So
Yeah.
new leagues always have hardship. MLS
Yeah.
has had hardships in the beginning. So perhaps in the future we'll look back on this and say, maybe we shouldn't have been complaining about it. They needed to do this to get to this, right? And so here they are. Hopefully that's the case. That's what I want,
Yeah.
right? I just feel like they're not, when you're watching games, like the home team, the road team, that matters to me. The crowd being in fully immersed in the action, that
Yeah.
matters to me. And so that local, that matters to me. So it's and people don't want to be reminded of the pandemic when they watch these games.
Yeah.
The attendance doesn't have to be great. If you're in an individual market, if you're in Houston and you're doing 5,000, okay to start.
Yeah.
Right, you can build upon that. At least look in the XFL championship game. The one thing they did have was they had fans from all fan bases at the game. They're
I was
legitimately
there. I was there
Guardians
both
fans.
championships, USFL too.
I was
Not this year.
I was pretty surprised. Like there's legitimate Vipers and Guardians fans, the two teams that like took a lot of heat during the season. They didn't
Yeah.
have very good records, and attendance wise, it wasn't too spectacular. But I was surprised that there was actually fans from that traveled. So you got to plant your seeds in order to grow. They haven't planted their seeds yet.
Yeah.
You're not gonna grow artificially. You
Yeah.
need actual like real sunlight. So I don't see that for the Generals and Maulers in Ohio.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to continue, and I think they should kind of stick with it for year 3, I would push all my chips into that gambling aspect, because you don't need to then worry about local markets and people watching and being turned off because they have fantasy teams, USFL, News Hub Fantasy, which was just written by myself, by the way. And please give us a free API. Not spending $9,000 on an API. I'm sorry. I won't even spend $900 on an API. But
Yeah, they need to lean
focus on
into fantasy and gambling. Like I'm really hoping that one of these
lean
leagues
into
figures it
that
out.
next year. Plus,
Someone's
to
gotta
me,
figure it
there's
out.
a little blood in the water when it comes to the XFL. We've talked about this on other programs that, if the XFL has this kind of dip in year 2, that there's concern that there might not be a year 3 there. So
Very
if you
possible.
got the
Very
business model
possible.
and you're
Mhm.
chilling and you're hanging out on the sidelines, I would definitely have Canton have its own team, do whatever you got to do. You could still keep it the 4, try to build those local fan bases up, push all your chips into fantasy and betting and all this other stuff, real-time betting. I don't know, the XFL didn't have it. None of the leagues had it, where it's like, fourth quarter and you can bet in the fourth quarter if players did. I don't think the USFL had that either.
Yeah, and Fox has divisions that are dedicated to gambling. You
Yeah.
you like make the USFL like, hey, this is our, let's try out all this gambling stuff. Let's go all in on this.
All in on the gambling
They should
piece.
do it, and the USFL should make the fantasy stuff in house. I know I don't know why they're so dismissive. The reason why the NFL grew in popularity
Was
from the
because of fantasy
90s until
football.
now is because of fantasy football. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
It made fans bigger fans because they obtain knowledge about all the teams. A
And the
Jets fan
players.
can tell you, yeah, Jets fan can tell you everything about the Arizona Cardinals backup receivers. They will pay attention. If you
Yeah.
play fantasy football, you will pay attention to all 32 teams.
Yeah.
You will, in the middle of a work day during your lunch break, look at who the Rams practice report and see who played
Yeah.
and who's practicing and who's going to play and who's hurt and all that. It immerses you. It makes you're wrapped up in the league when the games are not even played. Because that's the thing. You like, how do you get people to talk about your league, not just when the games are on? Like, how do you get people to be interested in your league on a daily basis? How do you monetize the fan base when they're not at the games? You're only going to have 5 home games a season,
Yeah.
so you have to figure out a way and so information is key. You need to promote your product. You need to provide
Fantasy and
information.
gambling. Yep.
You need to do that heavily. And I think, and then they need to go out of their way to try to, that's the thing. They don't have a lot of earned media coverage. You already have Fox and NBC in your house.
Yeah.
So you own the league. So it's like, to the USFL, plastered all over. Their commercials were plastered all over SmackDown, which is like one of the top shows, 18 to 49, in all the network television.
Yeah.
Every Friday night it does it. Their ratings keep going up. So every week you would see USFL ads during SmackDown, right, which is a hot show. And you see the USFL had ads during the Super Bowl. That wasn't paid for.
That
You
was
know how
huge
that's
for the
huge.
traffic for our site.
Constant
Exploded.
ads, constant. You know how people would die to have that? How much money people pay to have that? And they just had free advertising during the Super Bowl, during the NFL playoffs. So they had that benefit, but that still wasn't enough to lure in, the casual fans to come sample our product. We're here to stay. Look at Kavante Turpin. Look at this. Look at that.
Yeah.
The problem is when people sample the product, they see a lot of what they saw the year before: empty stadiums, no energy, no crowd energy. It doesn't feel like an it product. It's like just doesn't look like people care, like something's going on,
Yeah.
something's happening. So they need to figure out that. If they can figure out that and maintain, they're spending a lot of money, but they're not spending. You're going to end up, you pay for insurance, you pay tens of millions of dollars for player insurance, right? And then you pay tens of millions of dollars for player salaries, as well as employees for the league, right? Coaches, etc., trainers, etc.
Yeah.
You got to pay for all that stuff. So every year you're going to spend a lot of money. So, and Fox has ways of writing things off, and they have in-house deals that they can make. The XFL doesn't have that benefit. They're not owned by an actual network. They're partnership with ESPN. They
Yeah.
don't have that actual thing where you can say, hey, give us an ad here. We'll give you an ad here. We'll give you MLB for this. You come and, we'll do ads
Yeah.
together on our MLB broadcast as well as. So they don't have that benefit to do that. So they have a lot of nice advantages there, but they need to take advantage of them. So we'll see. Maybe a year from now, the Stallions will be winning their third straight championship.
Which I think they probably will. My last part, and then we'll wrap this up, is what I would do, because you were saying, what's the hook? What's the hook for year 3? So I'm waiting to see how the XFL unfolds. I'm always thinking, if Jerry Cardinal says I'm out, then the league is done. And it matters what he has said they're constituted, they have money for 2027. So, but I still I'm kind of like, well, we'll see how year 2 goes, whether or not, if the XFL.
I think year 2 is key. I think
that is that's it.
They might be gone. They might be gone in a year. The XFL could be done. If they don't, I think they're coming back for year 2. They have a contract till 2027.
Yeah.
But honestly, I think the USFL fell short this year in terms of ratings and attendance. It went down. They had almost 1.6 million viewers for the championship game. A year later, only 1.1. The ratings were down on Fox. Ratings were down on NBC. Ratings were down all across the board. So attendance wasn't very good. If the XFL comes back next year, and I think they're going to have more games on ABC, so that'll help.
Yeah.
And they'll have a better schedule, hopefully.
Hopefully.
But, that'll help their ratings. But if they're down lower and the attendance in some markets doesn't improve, the novelty wears off sometimes.
And then they've gotten rid of a lot of people too. So here's what I would.
So that basically, there's a chance the USFL could have this space all to themselves.
Right. And that's how
but we'll see.
But that's how you go into year 3. Your hook is that you say, hey, in year 4, we're adding 2 new teams, but we're not telling you who it is. Fans of wherever, somehow force them to kind of drum up excitement for that particular, hey, we're going to expand to 2 teams. We're not going to let you know until the end of the season. And we're going to let you, at the championship game, we're going to announce the top 10 finalists to have an expansion team. That's free. And you could lie and you can be like, we already know the 2. We're just going to kind of tease this out all season long. Hey, we're bringing another team. That would just pump people up all season long. Well, hey, I might be getting a team in my neck of the woods, so I'm going to watch. And then that's how
I got to say this. I know all the fans who comment, I get it in DMs. I get it in comments and articles. All the fans want. One of the things people point out is the potential of these leagues merging, right?
Uh-huh.
And so, I'm part of that. I don't know how realistic that is, but I would love it if these 2 leagues came to the table and merged. If for some crazy reason the XFL is not around in 2025, 2026, 2027, and the USFL still is, I would suggest to them, do everything in your power to get the St. Louis Battlehawks trademark and all that, add them to your league. Do everything in your power to add the DC Defenders to your league. Those are 2 markets you can go into ready-made. I would love to see these two leagues come to the table, because could you imagine if these two leagues had one in, even if it was just 12 teams, not 16, although 16 would be preferred, but if it was a 12 team league, right? And teams are in their markets, they pool their resources together, and this joint league together is on Fox, NBC, ABC,
You're done.
ESPN.
Yeah.
It would be really dope.
Yeah.
Honestly, like that would be really cool. That's a way of getting expansion, right? The hard thing is figuring out timeline schedules, who gets the profits here, who gets the profits there, who's spending money here, who's spending money there. So that part is hard, like pooling resources and kind of figuring out those responsibilities. But I think that's what we need to see from these leagues. We need to get to year 3 and 4 where they're actually getting going. It's sad. It's kind of sad, messed up that USFL's not in their market. It's only 3 teams, whatever the hell. But we need to get to the point where there's expansion and there's new teams, there's new cities, there's signs of growth.
Yeah. That's the
And
key.
I understand that these leagues want to build up their strengths, right? You want to continue to build up Birmingham and Memphis and Michigan, and you want to. You're not going to. I'm the Generals and the Maulers and the Star. I love. It's hard for me to say because I'm a Generals fan, but I love the Stars' history and their logo and all that, even though they kind of look like McDonald's. But you're not going to get those. Are going to be failures. The Stars, the Maulers, the Generals are failures until they actually play in their markets. They don't mean anything. The Breaker, I hate to say this, they don't mean anything until they actually play in their cities. There's no connection there.
Yeah.
You're not gonna, your ratings. If the USFL was in these markets, I think their ratings would be higher. So I think if they were, oh my god, if the Generals were in the tri-state area, if the Stars were in Philly, if Pittsburgh, they would have ticket sales. I'm not guaranteeing they'll do average 12, 15, 20, but they'd actually have profits. They'd actually sell tickets. They would make money through the turnstile and selling merchandise more, et cetera, et cetera. They would have local media cover their teams.
True.
They would have better ratings. They would have better ratings if these teams were actually in their markets.
That's a good point.
Birmingham does well locally. They're the number 1 rated market. They were last year. They are this year. So they did well there, but and not as well as they should. But still, that people in that pocket care about the league. They need, if the USFL would have better ratings. It's hard enough as it is getting ratings. They would have better ratings if they're in their actual markets. They would actually have those TV markets show interest in the league and watch. That would pick up ratings. Right now, nobody in Pittsburgh, like I said, nobody in Houston's going crazy about the gamblers.
Yeah.
So very few people are. So they Breakers need to be in New Orleans. It's a good brand. They've had nice teams. They need to be in their city, right? And you will need to have that natural. It'll feel like a real league when there's actually home and road games. It's like a big deal in other leagues. It's like, oh my god, the Jets got to go to New England or whatever. Or the Ravens got to go play Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. That's a big deal. That's part of the storyline.
Well, you can still keep the 4 hubs and just have them just do what the XFL does and travel to their home games, to the home markets. They don't have to practice there.
Right. Exactly.
Just do the same thing.
I think you have to. You're in Ohio anyway. You have the stadium. Have an Ohio team. You should have done that from Jump Street.
Yeah.
I contend. I said this when the USFL came out, and I know this is like a little bit of a. It's kind of nasty when it comes in terms of war, but I said when the USFL had the jump on the XFL rebooting that they should have announced their franchises as St. Louis and DC, San Antonio, because gamblers have never played a game in Houston. The Stars have never played a game in Philadelphia. This iteration, modern day USFL. So why not? New Orleans, you could call New Orleans the Himalaya Breakers. What difference does it make? They don't play in New Orleans anyway, so you might as well just call them the Himalaya. So they could have had to say, I would have done that. I would have jumped on it and had a St. Louis team, had a DC team, just to get a jump on them, just to get those markets interested in your league. But if you're not playing in it, it doesn't matter. So it seems like we've been beating the hell out of that horse during this entire conversation. But I do think the USFL has a chance to expand and become more popular if they get to that point, that phase. I do think there's a window there. I don't see it as limited as some people I speak with. I do think there's a chance for growth, and because a lot of people think this is just a niche audience and that it's never gonna work. People don't. To them, work means be popular.
Yeah.
Right. Not just exist. So there's a lot of people think it'll never work. I think there's a chance for this to work, but you just have to take the right steps.
Yeah. All right. And I think it is safe to say that 2024 is really going to be the pivotal year for all of these leagues and whether or not they expand. If the XFL has this, there could be a Jerry call to Rupert Murdoch's son, Latchkin or whatever his name is, Latkin Murdoch, being like, "Hey, let's talk." I feel like the USFL is like, "Hey, we're good, we're doing our thing," but but if the XFL is moving up and the USFL is not seeing strong ticket sales there, I think after that season could be the turning point. If we're going to see something happen, I think it's going to be at the end of 2024, which makes it exciting for everybody to watch. Mike Mitchell, thanks again for being on the program. We went a little long, but there was a lot for us to talk about with the USFL. But again, it's been a fun season. I mean, more football is better. We are rooting for all of these leagues to succeed. Anybody who tells you otherwise is smoking
Yeah.
crack.
Thanks for all that you do, Mark, by the way. You know, a lot of this is obviously out of your pockets, your business, and all that you do to cover leagues like the CFL, the USFL, the Indoor Football League, all this stuff. You got a
Yeah,
wrestling background of covering all different kinds of promotions and all that. So it's in your blood to do that.
yeah.
So you've done that, and so thanks for doing that. You provide, an outlet for players and coaches and these leagues to be talked about, written about, and you provide an outlet for young professionals to advance their careers and be
Okay.
able to voice their opinions and write and all that. So appreciate, Mark, all that you do. I know that you're vilified and hated, maybe by some people in Canada and all that. It's like,
Yeah, I
but
love it.
they don't understand that you put in. There are a lot of guys in this space that do what you're doing. You put in a lot of your finances and resources to give these leagues the best possible coverage that you can.
Yeah,
And there aren't, if you look around, there really aren't a lot of outlets that do that. So I mean, we have people in the space that do that. Thank goodness there are people out there that do it, but
yeah.
there really aren't, because the mainstream media is not writing daily articles about these leagues. They're just not.
Yeah, hey, I appreciate you, Mike Mitchell, the king, the goat, for always being part of all the team here. We couldn't do it without you either because you are an icon in the alt football space. And if we're going to build a Hall of Fame, Mike Mitchell will be a first balloter. There's no question about that.
That's silly, but thank you. Thank you.
All right, Mike. Any final words to USFL fans to wrap up the 2023 season?
No, and thanks for coming aboard. Thanks for checking out the articles. Thanks for checking out the power rankings articles, the preview articles, reading all the guy Pat Ruffino, Sam Shady, all the
Yep.
great writers we have. Everybody on the team checking out their work. They work very hard. It's a labor of love. So and then I appreciate the fans who've given this concept a go, and I've checked out these articles and the people that care about these leagues. It's awesome to see.
Yeah.
So thanks for checking out everybody's work.
All right. Thank you. Thanks again.
Thanks, Mark.